It's Friday, July 26th. I'm Tre'vell Anderson.
And I'm Priyanka Aravindi, and this is What a Day, the show where we regret to inform you that former First Lady Melania Trump is releasing a memoir this fall.
In the words of that jacket she wore to the immigrant detention center, I really don't care, do you?
No, it did just occur to me that we could do dramatic readings from the memoir for this program, and that could be fun for us.
On today's show, new polling shows Vice President Harris is closing the gap with former President Donald Trump. Plus, an Ohio Supreme Court says boneless chicken wings can have bones.
Okay, interested in how they got to that conclusion. But first, it's an even happier Friday than usual because today marks the formal start of the Paris Summer Olympics. If the Olympics have not been the first thing on your mind lately, we do not blame you. In the last 2 weeks alone, we have had an assassination attempt on a former president, a whole new Democratic presidential candidate, a man named J.D. Vance, who we suddenly have to care about. A lot has been going on. But starting tomorrow, we have 16 days jam-packed with sporting events of every kind, from fan favorites like gymnastics and swimming to new additions like skateboarding, surfing, and even breakdancing. And of course, all of the world's best athletes in one place.
And the political backdrop of these games is definitely layered. We'll get to more of that in just a moment. But what can we expect to see this year in Paris?
First of all, COVID restrictions kept fans away from the last summer and winter games, but spectators are back this year and ready to watch all of their favorite events with some very Parisian backdrops. Think beach volleyball by the Eiffel Tower, open water swimming in the Seine. But one event in particular is a little bit further away. Surfing is taking place all the way in Tahiti, which is actually a part of French Polynesia. I just want to say, we need a WAD correspondent for that. I think I'm available at a moment's notice.
Two, okay?
Yep. Why not? WAD from Tahiti. It could be great. As usual, the U.S. is expected to go home with the most medals. No surprise there. And there are definitely some events we will not be missing. Top of mind, of course, is Simone Biles and USA Gymnastics. Back in 2021, Biles pulled out of the all-around competition in the Tokyo Games, but she is back and going for gold again during the women's final. American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson will finally make her Olympics debut. She very infamously lost her spot in the Tokyo Games after testing positive for THC, but she is making her big comeback. She actually had the best 100-meter sprint time in the world this year during the Olympic trials. And of course, in swimming, 7-time gold medalist Katie Ledecky is back in the pool for 5 different events.
Shout out yet again to all the ladies holding it down, okay?
Absolutely. I wasn't even finished with them. I mean, in soccer, the games have started already, and the U.S. women's national team off to a great start. They won their first game against Zambia on Thursday, 3-0. Same cannot be said for the men's side. Unfortunately, host country France wiped the floor with them 3-0 on Wednesday. But I think that they are just happy to be there. The last time a U.S. men's soccer team went to the Olympics was back in 2008. And they haven't actually medaled in over a century. So I think they're just enjoying the uniforms and the vibes.
You know what? Shout out to them. Shout out to the uniforms, I guess. And shout out to the vibes.
Yeah.
I am not a sports fan myself per se, but I will definitely be tuned into artistic swimming, aka synchronized swimming. Okay, it's just so beautiful, okay, if I do say so myself.
Love it. I'm in. Let's watch.
But of course, I wouldn't be me if I didn't also draw attention to what we won't be seeing on our TV screens while watching the Olympics, and that's the story of what's happening right outside the arena. Protests in Paris have ramped up in recent days ahead of the opening ceremony to rally support for several different causes. Many locals have taken to the streets to speak out against the city's displacement of migrant and unhoused populations ahead of the games. There have also been protests against French President Emmanuel Macron's government amid France's recent snap parliament election. And there have also been anti-war demonstrations invoking both the war in Ukraine and Israel's continued destruction of Gaza. So there's a thick political backdrop behind this year's games, to say say the least.
Definitely. And that is all very, very important to discuss. I know it'll be at play for this whole games.
Absolutely. So to talk more about what political issues are at play during this year's Olympics, I called up Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation and host of the Edge of Sports podcast. He is in Paris covering the games, and I started by asking him to paint a picture of the protests happening on the ground right now.
Things in Paris are very tense. This is not a bunch of people sitting around sipping wine waiting for the games to start. I was at a protest this evening of several thousand people at a place called Plaza de République, and the demands being raised are pretty widespread because it's a large coalition of groups that have come together to oppose the Paris Olympics. And what they're opposing in particular has been an unprecedented crackdown on unhoused people. That's really one of the main issues. 12,500 people, at least, have been loaded onto buses and driven outside of Paris. So, they're not an eyesore for visiting dignitaries and elites coming in for the Olympics. There's been what they call a social cleansing of the city that has a lot of people on edge. And that includes taking apart shanty towns, attacking sex workers, going after encampments, like all sorts of varieties of folks in different precarious housing situations. Another issue that's really animating people to the core is militarization of the police. In Paris is like some action movie from the 1980s right now. There are 70,000 security officials on the ground in the city, 20,000 of whom are undercover. And the ones that are not undercover are armed to the teeth. The other issue, though, that really runs through a lot of this is the issue of Palestine and Israel. There's a huge Palestinian rights movement in Paris. The presence of Israeli athletes has led people to have a slogan where they say genocide is not a sport. People are also asking questions about the hypocrisy of Russian athletes who have been sanctioned heavily for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, while Israeli athletes are actually being celebrated by the International Olympic Committee and various officials. So because of that, you have a seriously Parisian Olympics. But there's even more than that. I mean, the workers at the hotel where the International Olympic Committee is staying, a hotel they rented, by the way, for 22 million euros, are protesting and picketing. The dancers at the opening ceremony might go on strike before the games. So will I go to any games? Will I see anything? I mean, there's enough to see outside the lines to keep me busy.
Absolutely. And then you also mentioned that the games, right, comes amid two wars. Right now, we have Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Israel's assault on Gaza. Now, Russia has been banned, like you just mentioned, from competing since 2022. But there's some outrage over how the International Olympic Committee has not banned Israel, for example, as the death toll in Gaza now exceeds 39,000, continues to rise. What message does the IOC send when they ban or don't ban a country?
It says that the International Olympic Committee is a group of aristocrats who are lickspittles of Western foreign policy. What does the United States want? The United States wants Russia sanctioned in every possible realm to really delegitimize Vladimir Putin for the brutal invasion of Ukraine. They want to do that culturally, they want to do that socially, they want to do that militarily, and they want to do that athletically. Meanwhile, the United States, of course, almost stands alone on the international scene in standing with the ugly, ugly assault that Israel has perpetrated on the people of Gaza. And by celebrating the Israeli athletes who've come here, the International Olympic Committee has inflamed people with their hypocrisy, and the French government has as well. Because that's a huge issue right now in French politics, where everything is super polarized. There were just elections where the far left coalition beat back the far right, and the far right fascists, even with their decades of history of anti-Semitism, have, completely without shame said, we stand with Israel, this idea of it being civilization versus barbarism and all the rest of it. But amongst people on the left, there's a ton of Palestinian solidarity. So it has inflamed people through the organized parties in France, not just on a street level, not just on a neighborhood organizing level.
What I'm hearing, though, is a whole lot of things that might make me, if I were leading a city, not want to host the Olympics because of the political minefield, because of the need to, seemingly bring in more security, but it ends up ruining the experiences of so many. Knowing all of this, and specifically the political backdrop in France that you just mentioned, why does French President Emmanuel Macron keep saying this is a good thing for the city of Paris? Like, what do they stand to benefit from hosting the games?
Emmanuel Macron, he sees the Olympics correctly as being an open faucet of profits for the people who back him and back his party. John Carlos, the great Olympian from 1968, who raised his fist with Tommy Smith on the medal stand, he once said to me that the reason why they have the Olympics every 4 years is that it takes them 4 years to count the money. So they are willing to put up with all sorts of inconveniences, political conflict, and all the rest of it because it benefits a wealthy few so intensely. You're talking about the real estate industry because of all the stadium building. And you also have another group of lovely people, the people who do national security and defense and arm those 70,000 police and military that I mentioned earlier. Like for the international weapons trade, the Olympics and the World Cup, those are their Super Bowls. So you have these very powerful interests that want the Olympics, but then you have ordinary people, and you've seen this more and more, who are saying, we don't want the Olympic Games. The International Olympic Committee is having a tougher and tougher time finding host cities, not because leaders don't want it, but because of popular resistance.
To me, that means, right, that all of these different interests are coming into a particular city to drive energy, money into it. But what happens after the games leave? Can you talk a little bit about the lasting impact that the Olympics sometimes have on cities that have previously hosted them?
I was in Rio in 2016, and I saw this firsthand. Is they tear down housing for poor and working class people. They promise there will be what they call mixed use housing so people can afford to live there. And then they completely break those promises and build higher income housing. And it's a way of making cities more like playgrounds for the elite and more unaffordable. And that's something that's happening in cities across the world. But the Olympics supercharge that. It's like taking the gentrification that cities across the world are all too familiar with and injecting it with a very, very potent kind of steroid. And then the other thing has to do with, we talked about all the police officers on the street. Invariably, when the Olympics come, they bring with them a security apparatus that is very hard to untangle once the Olympics are over. So a city becomes more invested in things like AI technology, facial recognition software, things that people would oppose, but then think, oh, well, we need them for the Olympics. Officials usually promise or even pass ordinances or laws that it won't be there 6 months after the games. We won't have it anymore. But I know in city after city that have hosted them, there's been a national security aftermath.
That was my conversation with Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation.
We'll get to some headlines in just a moment, but if you like our show, please make sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. We'll be right back after some ads.
Have a question or need how-to advice? Just ask Meta AI. Whether you want to design a marathon training program or you're curious what planets are visible in tonight's sky, Meta AI has the answers. It can also summarize your class notes, visualize your ideas, and so much more. It's the most advanced AI at your fingertips. Expand your world with Meta AI. Now on Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and Messenger. At the UPS Store, we want to make this summer the summer of shipping. Summer Shipalooza. So you can start crossing items off your must-ship list, like the vintage film camera your college kid needs for class, or the vase you told your mom you would send her ages ago. And with our pack and ship guarantee, your items arrive safe or we reimburse you. So stop by your local store today for everything you need to be unstoppable. Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Available at participating locations. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable.
Look at your cup holder. It's empty. And you're feeling thirsty. Head to a nearby convenience store and fill it with a Pepsi Zero Sugar, Mountain Dew, or Starry. Grab a delicious, refreshing Pepsi for the road.
Let's get to some headlines.
Headlines.
Vice President Kamala Harris met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday and pressed him to achieve a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas now. The one-on-one meeting was Harris's first with a foreign leader since her presidential campaign began, and in her subsequent comments to the press, she reiterated her position.
It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination.
Harris's rhetoric demonstrated more compassion towards Palestinians than President Biden has, but on policy, her position does not differ from that of the administration.
An exciting new poll just dropped showing Vice President Harris in a near tie with former President Trump. Conducted after President Biden left the race, the New York Times Siena College poll has Harris behind by just 1 point among likely voters, with 47% to Trump's 48%. In a February Times Siena poll, Biden was trailing Trump by 6 points among this same group. Harris's favorability has risen too by 10 points since the February poll. And it could shoot up even further as the world witnesses a historic merger of the K-Hive and the Beehive. Beyonce's Freedom has become a signature song for Harris, playing under her first campaign ad and at her first public appearance as a 2024 presidential candidate earlier this week. Unlike seemingly every artist whose music plays at a Trump rally, Beyonce actually gave her permission for the song to be used, so she's telling the girls to get information.
Yes, and we heard her loud and clear. Also, just want to say, loved the song. Always got chills from the song. But now, under this video, it's just another level. It's really great. California Governor Gavin Newsom instructed cities in his state to remove thousands of homeless encampments on Thursday. Newsom's executive order comes 1 month after a Supreme Court decision that expanded the rights of local governments to block people from sleeping outside. In California, cities and towns can decide whether or not to follow Newsom's directive. A spokesperson for San Francisco Mayor London Breed said efforts to dismantle camps in that city have already begun. But in Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass responded to the order with a statement saying, quote, "Strategies that just move people along from one neighborhood to the next or give citations instead of housing do not work." The impact of Newsom's order could be vast. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, there were 180,000 homeless people in California last year, with the majority of them sleeping on the streets.
An alarming report was released this week by New Zealand's Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in Care. It found that from 1950 to 2019, an estimated 200,000 people were abused while in the care of state and faith-based institutions in the country. Many of those who suffered this abuse were children. The report also states that Indigenous Maori people were more likely to be placed in state care, despite making up less than 20% of the country's population. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon spoke at a press conference following the publication of the report.
To the survivors, I want to say thank you for your exceptional strength, your incredible courage, and also your confronting honesty. I cannot take away your pain, but I can tell you this. Today you are heard and you are believed.
The report notes that survivors who spoke to the commission want to see a complete overhaul of New Zealand's care systems, with an emphasis on granting local Indigenous communities control of these services.
Absolutely. This is just so widespread and horrific. Not even chicken wings are safe from partisan politics, it appears. In a 4-3 decision split along party lines, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled against a customer who swallowed a bone after ordering boneless chicken wings. An Ohio resident said that in 2016, he was eating boneless wings with Parmesan garlic sauce, which is an interesting order, but does sound good, when he noticed something go down the wrong pipe. He claims that he eventually went to the emergency room where a doctor found a 5-centimeter-long chicken bone stuck in his esophagus. He later sued the restaurant where he ate the wings, as well as its chicken supplier. But his quest for boneless justice has come to an end. In the majority opinion, Justice Joe Dieters wrote, quote, "The food items label on the menu described a cooking style. It was not a guarantee." In his dissent, Justice Michael Donnelly fired back that when consumers, quote, read the word boneless, they think that it means without bones, as do all sensible people. I mean, yes, correct. That is the right take here. This is a dumb lawsuit, but this is pretty cut and dry.
I'm all over the place, okay? Because yes, boneless means less bone. Maybe that was it. They saw less.
Oh my
and they
God,
just
they just did less bones?
That's what it was.
Trevel, no, you're arguing for the wrong side.
Oh, Lord. This is what we have to deal with now, Priyanka.
I feel like I got a window into the courtroom in this moment.
There you go. You're welcome.
And those are the headlines. One more thing before we go. It should come as no surprise that Republicans are already hard at work trying to discredit Vice President Kamala Harris as she begins her historic presidential bid. They are going to come out with the most offensive attacks that you can think of. They already are. But it's going to be up to each and every one of us to fight back by talking about the stakes of the election with our MAGA-curious uncles and our Harris-skeptical cousins, everyone we know. How can you do this? By listening to WAD, of course, but also check out Dan Pfeiffer's Friends of the Pod series Pollacoaster for insights from the latest voter polls and to sign up for Dan's Message Box newsletter for the relevant political talking points that you need to help contribute to a Democratic win this November. Head to crooked.com/YesWeDan to unlock a 1-month free trial for both Friends of the Pod and Message Box. All right, love that.
That is all for today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, carefully inspect your chicken wings, and tell your friends to listen.
If you are into reading and not just polls that terrify Trump like me, What Today is also a nightly newsletter. Check it out and subscribe at crooked.com/subscribe. I'm Priyanka Arabindi.
I'm Trevel Anderson. And you can't make us read Melania's book.
Except we will do the dramatic readings if enough of you ask for it. So go on Friends of the Pod, blow up the Twitter, do all the things.
I mean, based on her history, she probably didn't write the book. So is it her book?
It's a Michelle Obama speech. I'm happy to dramatically read Becoming.
Listen, they go low, we go high, all right?
What a Day is a production of Crooked Media. It's recorded and mixed by Bill Lance. Our associate producer is Raven Yamamoto. We had production help today from Michelle Alloy, Ethan Oberman, John Milstein, Greg Walters, and Julia Clare. Our showrunner is Erica Morrison, and our executive producer is Adrian Hill. Our theme music is by Colin Gilliard and Kashaka.
Have a question or need how-to advice? Just ask Meta AI. Whether you want to design a marathon training program or you're curious what planets are visible in tonight's sky, Meta AI has the answers. It can also summarize your class notes, visualize your ideas, and so much more. It's the most advanced AI at your fingertips. Expand your world with Meta AI. Now on Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and Messenger.
At the UPS Store, we want to make this summer the summer of shipping. Summer Shipalooza. So you can start crossing items off your must-ship list. Like the vintage film camera your college kid needs for class. Or the vase you told your mom you would send her ages ago. And with our pack and ship guarantee, your items arrive safe or we reimburse you. So stop by your local store today for everything you need to be unstoppable. Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Available at participating locations. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable.